Welcome to Elected, a podcast for women in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara, and this week our guest is Jill Promoli. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. So today on Elected, my guest is Jill Promoli. She's a small business owner, a photographer, if I understand correctly, a mom of 3, and she became a flu prevention advocate after the sudden death of one of her twin boys in 2016. She founded For Jude, For Everyone, an organization to promote better awareness and understanding about the flu and other preventable illnesses to protect our communities. And you also advocate for policy changes at every level to help improve public health. You've gotten a lot of support from, you're based in Ontario, but this is an issue, obviously, that affects all Canadians and really all people everywhere. You're originally from Port Elgin, and you have a BA in poli-sci from Wilfrid Laurier, where you met your husband, and you've taught English in Toronto and taught English in Toronto. You worked in Korea. I'm assuming that was my mistake. Yes. I assumed that you were teaching English.
Yeah.
Yes. And working in Toronto, and now you and your family are in Mississauga. So welcome to Elected, Jill.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here today. It's quite an honor.
Oh, no, the honor is all mine because I've been a long-term Twitter admirer of yours. And when you started sharing your story about Jude, and it immediately captured my attention and my heart. So if you don't mind, how did you become a flu prevention advocate? Because this is a very, very important thing that you need to share with people so they understand.
Yeah. It's absolutely not the soapbox I would have chosen for myself. It was one that was handed to me. As you mentioned, 5 years and 2 weeks ago, we lost one of our twin boys to a school flu outbreak. So Jude had been 2 years old at the time, and my daughter was in kindergarten. And it was the first week of May. And we got a call from the school letting us know that she had spiked a fever, and she'd been fine that morning. But when I went to go pick her up, I found out that this nasty bug had been going through the classroom. And at that point, almost the entire class had been sick. Some kids had been out for weeks. Some had been hospitalized. We had no idea this had been going on. But I brought her home, and she was better within 24 hours. For her, it was just a fever and some exhaustion. We kept her home until the Thursday because we knew that she had a higher risk classmate. We didn't want to risk sending her back when she was still infectious. On the Friday morning, Jude woke up with a low-grade fever, and I wasn't concerned because we had just seen Isla go through it at the beginning of the week. And it didn't seem very serious. He was playing, he was fine, he was himself. And then that afternoon, I put Thomas and Jude down for their nap, and when I went to go wake them up to pick up Isla from the school bus, Thomas was up and laughing and Jude wasn't. And this was very unusual for 2 twin boys sleeping in the same room. One would wake up the other, and it would be chaos. And when I went to go check on Jude, it was clear very quickly that he wasn't sleeping. He just wasn't okay. So I called 911. I started CPR. I ran down to the driveway with him and called for help. My neighbors came and helped emergency response while we waited for the paramedics. But it was too late, and it wasn't immediately clear what had happened to him. It was May, and people weren't really looking for the flu at that point, so they didn't test for the flu. They weren't looking for it. And it wasn't until we had the final results from the autopsy, and that took several months before they were able to definitively confirm that Jude had died from influenza B, and it had caused cardiac arrest. And for me, this was something that really caught us off guard because, you know, the kids had all been vaccinated. We thought everything that we could to protect them. And of course, we know that while vaccines are our best first defense, they're not a guarantee. And there are going to be people who fail to develop immunity. But it just didn't look like what we thought the flu would look like. We thought that you would see more respiratory symptoms, that you would see that, there would be a cough, congestion, something. But for him, he was just here and gone so quickly. And because we were so confused by how this all happened, we had a lot of questions. And I spent a lot of time speaking with our doctors, with our coroner, with infectious disease experts, just to try and get a handle on what had happened to Jude and why our family had been so devastated so quickly by what we generally consider to be a fairly benign disease, especially for, people who we would consider otherwise healthy. And when, I realized if we had all these questions and we thought we'd been fairly well informed, then probably a lot of other people would also have these questions and would maybe not have the information that they need to protect themselves either. And so I learned as much as I could, and we thought about how we could share with friends and family what we had learned about why we had lost Jude. And the more we learned, the more that we realized that we couldn't just put it out onto Facebook and say, okay, well, we learned what happened to Jude. He died from the flu, and have people go off with their assumptions about it. We needed to make sure we were going to communicate it properly so people wouldn't take the message to be that Jude had his flu shot and he died anyway, and so the flu shot is pointless. We wanted people to understand how important it was, that the more of us who take steps to prevent the flu and to protect ourselves and each other, the fewer stories there are going to be like ours, and that Jude is sort of a fluke out of people who are protected. And but the more that we're doing as communities, the better we all can be. So we made a decision to speak publicly, and I started this campaign for Jude for Everyone. And the goal was to hopefully see an improvement in flu vaccination rates and people just taking more steps to reduce their chance of getting sick, and also to pass on illness to people around them. And hopefully there will be fewer families in our shoes.
Yeah, my heart breaks for you. I'm just so incredibly sorry that you have had to go through this.
Thank you.
As a mother and just as a person, I just wish that had never happened to you. And,
Thank you.
I can't, you have so much strength. Yeah.
I don't know. I think it just seemed like the only way forward. That first weekend was it was shock, but there's nothing else to do. You have to keep moving forward. There were 2 other kids here who, we needed to figure out how to keep going for. And then, when we really thought about how we would move forward and how we would talk about what happened to him, all we could think was, what if the conversation about flu prevention and illness prevention in general had been louder and better a year earlier and could have protected our family and stopped this from happening to us? And what if we could do something that would make that difference for another family? Because I wish so badly that had been the case, that somebody had been speaking more loudly about it. And when we think about it, Jude didn't get the flu until May, and flu season's really long. Like, it starts at the end of September. And if you think about how many people had to have gotten the flu in all those months in between, and what if just one more person had their flu shot, or stayed home when they were sick, or washed their hands an extra time, all those little things add up. And just one person breaking that chain could have made the difference between him being here today. And he would also be in grade 1 doing virtual learning next to his twin brother right downstairs right now. And instead he's gone. So that's what we've been, asking people to consider, is how those little steps could make the difference between somebody surviving the year or not surviving the year. And we can't predict who those people will be. We don't know what the impact of our action might be, but, somewhere along the line, one person just taking one extra step would have meant that he would still be alive. And it's worth it to take those extra steps if it means that we can reduce those numbers of deaths. I know I was I was shocked to learn how many Canadians die from the flu every year. It sounds so small now that we've lived through COVID, but it's about 3,500 Canadians every single year. And that's actually a lot of people who are dying from a preventable illness, and we can do better.
We can. I think, we should want to do better for Jude and for every child and every person.
Yeah.
I don't see this as a selfish kind of movement, because it's really for the protection of everyone, as a community.
Yeah.
Did you ever circle back with the school around like that piece about having what the school can do in cases where there is an outbreak? Around notifying parents more proactively and earlier on?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did have that conversation. It's actually been years of conversations at different levels to try and see how we could both reduce illness in the classrooms, but also have better communications about what's going on, because I didn't know what was going on there. I don't know that it would have made a difference if we had known that outbreak was happening. I really don't. I don't know. Would we have made a different choice? Would we have kept Isla home? I don't know, because I don't know at what point many kids had been sick, right? So it wasn't because she took the bus. So it's not like I was going and seeing how many kids were missing from the classroom. So it was just, I really learned about it all so much after the fact. And so I did bring that question to the school. I also later brought it to the school board, and I asked, at what point do we consider something an outbreak? At what point do we notify families that something is happening in a classroom? At what point do we, take something very seriously about what's going on with the health of our students, so that families know how to prepare themselves and protect themselves? Because I didn't realize that there had been, students in the hospital. I didn't know how serious it was, and that would have been helpful to know, how to. And again, like once illness is in the classroom and it comes back home again, it makes it very difficult to control it within your home. And this is something that I know a lot of us have, again, had a real crash course in this year with the pandemic. It's hard to separate yourselves from people within your home who've been exposed or infected. And I know a lot of parents are really struggling with this. If they have had a child exposed in daycare in the classroom, and there have been different places where advice have come where, to isolate the exposed child or the sick child. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how I could have isolated my 5-year-old from my 2-year-old. So
No, I don't. I mean, it's different if it's an adult and they can go and, exist in a separate room for 10 plus days.
Yeah.
But you can't do that with a 5-year-old. They need their parents. So you can't just put them in a room and be like, I'll bring you your food. Here's an iPad. That's it,
right? And they need hugs.
Yes.
Yeah, kids, they need hugs.
They need touch.
They need their parents, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where I have wanted to see through the last years. And it's wild now to think it's been 4.5 years since we launched the campaign. It'll be 5 in the fall. I would love to see us do a better job about communicating about illness prevention through our schools. And I think there's a real opportunity there to reduce how much illness we have in the classroom by helping people understand the steps that they can take and how they can work with their kids on things like hand hygiene, or, even just reminding about sick day policies, or reminding parents about, just the standard vaccine schedule. And that doesn't mean, telling people to go vaccinate their kids, because I know that there are different feelings about that, but it does mean reminding people to have those conversations with their doctors. And I think that these are important informational and educational pieces that we should be having to make sure that we are protecting health within the classroom, because every child has the right to go to school and to learn, but they have a right to do that in a safe and healthy environment. And right now we're not doing everything that we can to make sure that we're keeping those environments safer. And there are simple ways that we can be doing that. And a lot of it comes down just to education. And I can't tell you how often I hear from people, I just didn't know. And that's something that it's it's nearly daily when I'm doing this work about illness prevention. Just people they didn't realize how serious something that sounds so benign, because we always lump it in with the cold, right? It's cold and flu season, and the cold doesn't sound very serious. And when we lump it together with the flu, that doesn't sound very serious either. But it's a lot more dangerous than I thought it was. We actually lose almost twice as many people to the flu every year as we do to car accidents. And when we think about how many car accidents we hear about on the news every day, I know when I'm, watching the morning news and getting ready for the day, there's always something. And especially in the winter, like we live in Canada, it's dangerous driving here, and we understand that there's a certain element of danger every time we get behind the wheel. But we're losing a lot more people to something that we can be doing better preventing. And our flu vaccination rates, and particularly for school-aged children, are very low in Canada. And we could be doing better to make sure that we are better protecting people.
Do you think that there's opportunity to have better conversations with concrete actions taken because of COVID, and people are now more willing to, or because we've had to go through the pandemic altogether, they have a better idea of how to mitigate some aspects of easily transmissible illnesses, and they would be more likely to put protections in place specifically for children and probably also seniors?
I would like to think so. And I'm hopeful that that's something that does come out of the pandemic. Something that's really interesting that's come out of this year. So while we have suffered so much devastation and we've lost so many of our community members, our neighbors, so many families have lost their loved ones. While we have suffered so much loss to COVID, we've essentially wiped out the flu from this year. So it just didn't exist. So all these measures that we took that really mitigated the effects of the pandemic, they also were tremendously effective at bringing down our infection rates when it came to the flu. Like our case numbers were so tiny. So we know that we can take these steps that do reduce the amount of transmission. I don't believe we should be living the way that we've been living for the past year. Like this is extreme. We should not be doing what we've been doing, but there are things that we can be doing to do things better. And I think a lot of that does come down to, prioritizing people's health and well-being over, for example, a day of work. And we haven't been doing that. And so that is going to mean that we're going to need some shifts in the way that we stack somebody's health or life against a day of work. And so there's going to be a lot of important conversations coming out of the pandemic about what the future of paid sick days is, for example. That comes down to, that's something that I've been very vocal about for a number of years now. And I've been glad to see that there has been some shift, not as much as we need here in Ontario. And you guys didn't have any shift there, did you?
No.
The pandemic? Okay. This is something that we do need to be having. And of course, it falls into the provincial umbrella. I'd love to see every province fall in line on this, because every province and territory, and we see different policies in every region, and some policies are much more generous than others. We know that, we're not doing enough to make sure that we're protecting people. And by doing that, we're ending up with a lot of illness in workplaces and in classrooms. And preventing that wouldn't just make for healthier classrooms and workplaces and healthier communities as a whole. It would also have this incredible benefit for our healthcare systems, because every year, we've seen this year what's happened with needing to cancel scheduled surgeries. That happens every single year, not to the extent that we've had to do, but during flu season, we have to, hospitals have to cancel scheduled surgeries. They have to go in surge protocols. This isn't a new thing. It's just a lot more extreme while we're dealing with the pandemic. So this is, this would have a huge benefit in reducing the amount of our healthcare resources that have to go to something as simple as the flu, which is actually a lot more serious than we realize. I know here in Ontario, we have about 5,000 flu hospitalizations every single year. In Canada-wide, it's about 12,500. That's a lot of money that we're spending on hospitalizations. And that's not including people who go to walk-in clinics, who go to their doctor's offices, who go to the ER because they don't have access to a primary care physician. We're spending a lot of money instead of allowing people to stay home when they're sick in the first place.
It's one of those things where, because I think paid sick days has become very political, unfortunately. And it doesn't make any sense that this is yet another thing. I think that we become reactive to, not proactive in dealing with, and it ultimately ends up, not only on the financial side, it does potentially end up costing a lot more money, because you're not doing anything to try to mitigate it. But you're also just, saying, there's a human toll to it as well. And which is that you cannot put a price on that. So do you share my frustration around the politicization of these kinds of issues? I mean, COVID and the flu and money and healthcare funding and paid sick days, because some days I just want to throw my hands up in the air and say, why is this so hard? Why is this so political?
100%. I really do think that we need to, for me, politics should be about putting people first. I feel like the job of government is to serve people. And if we're not doing that, then we're not doing it properly. Like there's something wrong there. And I don't know who said it first, but it really resonated with me. And it was something that really hit home. After they, again, in Ontario, voted against paid sick days, somebody said they value our work, but they don't value our lives. And that just, it really hit home for me, because I have thought so often through the years how we keep choosing work over people, and work is important. I mean, that's how we live. Like people, we understand, like that's it's a necessary part of our lives, and we need to make sure that businesses are able to succeed. And we need to make sure that people are able to work. And I mean, that's it. That's part of our lives. And we don't want to see businesses fail. But I have wondered so many times through the years what day of work we paid for with Jude's life. And I don't know why we don't do more to make sure that somebody being healthy and alive isn't more important than a day of minimum wage work. And when it comes down to it, there are a lot of Canadians who do have paid sick days. What is the number? It's somewhere around 58% of Canadians do not have access to paid sick days. I'd have to double check that, but let's roll with that just in case. It's approximately 58% do not have access to paid sick days. When you think about that, that means 42% of Canadians do have paid sick days. And where is the opposition to everybody having access to that? Why is something that is about our health, about making sure that we can stay home when we're sick and not infect others at work, why is that considered a benefit? Why isn't that just healthcare? Why isn't that public health? Because that's what it is. And that shouldn't be something that you get as a reward for having a certain job. That should just be something that's part of recognizing the fact that we all have bodies and our bodies get sick. And you shouldn't have to earn the right to stay home when you're sick based on the kind of job that you have. You shouldn't have to earn the right to not be infected at work because of the work that you do.
Well, and I also think our culture just prioritizes work. Oh, you're not, you have a runny nose, go to work. You're not feeling 100%, go to work. And then the expectations that, because of the systems, that just everything that is in place is that you contribute and you're productive and you work hard, and it doesn't really matter if you're not feeling 100% because, people are expecting you to send that email and attend that meeting and, get on that flight and be there and show up. And we don't have those conversations around, the value of work on the human side.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger of the politicization of this is that it's, you sound like a socialist, or, what do you believe in, communism? No, that's not what this is about. This is just about people, and you can still work hard and do a good job, but you can also take care of yourself and your family. And to 100% to your point, everyone should have that right. That should not be something that you only get with, a job in an office. Mm-hmm. If anything, it's the people who don't have those jobs who are essential workers, especially in a COVID context, that deserve it most of all.
And who really need it, right?
Yes.
Because we shouldn't have people who have to make the decision between going to
food,
work, and especially when they're very sick, or staying home and then not being able to afford groceries or rent, or potentially losing their job, because those are the people who are most at risk if they do get sick and they have to make that decision. It's people who are earning a lower income or who are precariously employed. And I grew up in a lower income situation. I was raised by a single mom. My dad died when I was quite young, and she raised 2 kids on minimum wage. And I remember how hard that was for her, and how there would be times where if she got sick or one of us got sick, there would have to be a hard choice made. Like if somebody had to stay home, that meant that like she was losing hours at work, and then that meant she wasn't getting paid. And that's not, it's not getting better. We know that those gaps are growing. Minimum wage is not keeping up with the cost of living. And then, when I was in university, again, like I didn't have money growing up. I didn't have money in university. So I was quite poor. And I really relied on every minimum wage hour that I could work. And if I got sick, I would have to make that choice between going in and knowing that I was too sick to work, or being able to buy my groceries, or knowing if I could afford my rent at the end of the month. And like my rent was only $300, and I lived in the terrible basement. And that was 20 years ago, and it's not getting better. It's not getting easier for people. And nobody should be in that position. And we know that there are a lot of people in that position. So like right here in Peel, I know Peel region has made the news a lot this year because our COVID rates have been so high. But in our region, we have about 1.4 million people. And just in our industrial section, there are 300,000 essential workers who are earning a lower income. Many of them are precariously employed, and they don't have paid sick days. So right there, of course, we're going to have high COVID numbers because their workplaces never closed. So while we've been in extended lockdowns for months on end, we haven't done anything to meaningfully address the places where infections have been rising and staying high constantly throughout this last almost 15 months now that we've been living with this. And we're just not putting those workers first. We haven't shown them that we actually care about their health or their lives. We just want them to keep going to work and, being in manufacturing, making sure that the rest of Ontario is taken care of, because really right here in Peel, those workers have kept our province going. They've kept our orders fulfilled and our shelves stocked so that the rest of the province has been okay. But we haven't done enough to protect those people who have kept the rest of us going. And they're people. They're people with families. They're people with kids in our classrooms. Those are our neighbors. And there's no reason why their health shouldn't also be important while we're doing all of this.
I totally agree. And I feel like I wish we could, we could really just, if we could create a new kind of budgeting structure where we can think about what the fundamentals are. So if it's healthcare and education are the top 2, and then other things, and we really put the emphasis on funding those things adequately. in conjunction with the federal government, because those are provincial responsibilities, but and just be a lot more thoughtful about it, and then to take the political explosives out of it. And because I think that what gets lost immediately is the rhetoric of, oh, how are you going to pay for this? And, well, this costs money, and where are you going to take it from? And, well, it's tough choices. And okay, well, I think that you have made the ultimate sacrifice, that no one should have to make.
Yeah.
So how do we prevent that from happening to anyone else?
And that's it, right? We have to want to. We have to want to not see more stories like ours. And we're not going to prevent every case of the flu, just the way that we can never prevent every case of COVID-19. That was never going to happen. It didn't have to be this bad. We're certainly in a much worse position than we should have been. And I think it's really important that we recognize that that when you choose the economy over public health, you get neither. You can't keep your economy going if you're not protecting the health and lives of your workers. And that's part of it. We have to recognize that, that's a key element. But I mean, we have to want people to not get sick, and we have to care about people as the top priority. And for me, that's always a driving force. Like I don't think there's anything more important than making sure that that people are alive and well and taken care of at the end of the day. And if we're not making that the top goal, if we're putting anything else above that, then we're doing it wrong. Because what possibly could be more important than that? And I really do think we'd be in a much better position right now in the pandemic if we had done more to prioritize controlling community transmission. We can see in other regions where they did that, where they chose to take a stronger control over community transmission, and they've been able to more fully reopen, and they haven't lived through endless months of lockdown. And I mean, we can see the effect right here where I live. I don't know how many small businesses will reopen their doors when this is all over, because even months ago, I was hearing from business owners that were upwards of $100,000 in debt and weren't sure what they'd be able to do. And it's just not getting better. We have to recognize that taking care of people is good for all of us. And but beyond that, it's the right thing to do. And what else are we here for? But to make sure that people are okay.
Yes, people do need to be okay. And especially our children. I have a hard time expressing it without becoming just incredibly emotional, but I wish you didn't have to advocate for these things. I wish as much as I love talking to you, but I wish that we didn't have to be. I wish that we weren't talking today, and I wish that Jude was still here. And I don't know why this is so difficult.
This is it. And it's been hard this year seeing how many families have lost their loved ones, and knowing, we're 5 years in now. So Jude's anniversary was just 2 weeks ago. And now here I'm going to get a little bit emotional. And knowing how it is just never going to get better. And there's something about the fact that it is preventable. And again, like we were never going to prevent all of this. There were going to be some cases that were always going to be beyond our control. But knowing that the lack of control over this was a choice, it's really painful to see, because there are a lot of families who have lost so much through this. And there are a lot of people who are gone now and they won't be back. And those families are going to have to live with those empty chairs for the rest of their lives. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of elected representatives over the last few years, as I've been advocating for paid sick days in particular, but also just for better messaging, for better communications on illness prevention, because it would make a really big difference, particularly in our schools. Mm-hmm. It's funny, the people that you meet having these conversations, and there will be people who are immediately compassionate and understanding, and they get that there's better that can be done. And then sometimes you meet people who say, oh, that's sad, but what about businesses? And it's like, and I just keep coming back to those conversations in my head through this last year, and knowing that there are people making those specific calculations in their heads, and that there are a lot of people who have now lost so much because that's the choice that was made. They chose, and it didn't even work because here we are, shut down for months on end again. But so many people have lost so much over these poor choices, and that can never be made better. We can recover a lot, but we can't bring back those people.
No, we definitely can't. That's it's the tragic human toll of all of this. And on top of it, not just the loss of the people, but the mental side of this for everyone living it day to day, the effects on children, on mental health, on our physical health. It's a lot, and it's all just adding up. But what do you like? If you, unfortunately, we all come into contact with people who are skeptical about COVID, who don't believe that it's real, that it's just like the flu, that it's just not a big deal, that masks are a joke, that it's just whatever, and it's a government conspiracy. So I think it's particularly shameful in the context of, it's disrespectful to anyone who has lost a family member. It's disrespectful to you, who has lost a child to the flu. What is your message to those people who are skeptical about the effects of the flu and of COVID, and of really just making some small changes that can have large impacts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not surprised to see it, because my inbox has been a bit of a nightmare for the last 4.5 years. But it's hard, because I think that we are dealing with a time right now where there's a particular mistrust of authority, a mistrust of politicians, a mistrust of and that extends now to a situation like this, a mistrust of doctors and of people who we see in those positions. And it's not the majority of people, but there's certainly there's a vocal minority of people who question how real this is, and often it's people who haven't been affected directly, who haven't seen it for themselves, who are very fortunate not to have lost something significantly, health-wise to an illness like COVID-19, like the flu. We are seeing our vaccine rates drop in some particularly concerning areas. Oh, is my connection okay? I just got a notice. Okay,
no, it's good.
And it is worrying, because we do need to make sure that we are doing a better job having those conversations. It's been a little bit hard this year to see all of the comparisons to between COVID-19 and the flu, because they are two different diseases, and people often will either compare COVID to the flu to either make COVID big and to make the flu small, or to try and make COVID small like the flu. And in both cases, it's not a helpful response. They're both serious illnesses. They both claim a lot of lives. COVID-19 right now is the more urgent threat, because we do not have, just now we have a vaccine. We have ways that we can start to combat it seriously without having to continue the way that we've been going for the last almost 15 months now. But we need to make sure that we're careful not to downplay other serious illnesses in the wake of how serious COVID-19 is. But there are people who are skeptical, again, of how serious COVID-19 is. And it is quite serious. And there are a lot of people who, I think because it's harder to see it, if it's not right in front of us, if it isn't our family member, our loved one, our neighbor who's gone, if we're not working on the front lines with doctors, with nurses who are right there and seeing the devastation that this illness is, causing in people's bodies, it's sometimes hard to see the numbers and understand what they mean. But those numbers are people. Like that's a person behind every single number. And there are going to be people who see those numbers and I don't know. It's hard. Like I think there are different groups that are sort of built into this conversation. There are people who are always going to be skeptical of what they hear from people who are in a position of authority, and that's there. There are people who will always be opposed to vaccines. There are people who have opposed masks throughout this. There are people who have been opposed to lockdowns for different reasons. I don't know, but it's hard because it's not going to make things any better. We do need to figure out how to get through this as well as we can. The light at the end of the tunnel, it's there. We can see it. We're getting so much closer now, but we're not there yet. So it's a tough conversation.
Yeah. And I just, in the context of Jude, it's just, I don't know how, I think, when something really, 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 really bad happens, you just, you just have to find the energy, right, to keep going. And but again, I really wish that you never had to find this strength, and that you it's just one of those things where I'm just so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Hopefully every conversation that we have about him will mean that, we're helping to prevent someone else from going through this, because it's not great. We would give anything to have him back, and he was awesome, and he should be here. And he was just, this wonderful, loving, hilarious little troublemaker. And I would absolutely love to see what he would be like today. And, it's such a terrible loss. And, it's never not going to hurt that it could have been prevented. And we have some peace knowing that we did everything that we could have to make sure that our family was safe. And at least we have that. But it's really hard knowing that it just wasn't enough. And as communities, I hope that coming out of this, that we are going to do a better job taking care of ourselves and each other, because there has been so much loss this year. And I think it's been harder to miss it the way that we miss flu losses each year. And again, that's a lot of people who die from the flu in a typical year. And we should be doing better. I know I was very surprised to hear how low our flu shot rates were. It shouldn't be that way. We can do better. It's a simple step we can take each year. But maybe going forward, we'll start to see people taking these things more seriously, because we do understand better now how quickly, something that we can't even see can claim, our loved ones and our neighbors and people in our community. Yeah. And something I forgot to mention when I introduced you is that you're actually running right now.
I am.
You've won the nomination. In which riding are you running?
Mississauga, Streetsville.
Okay. I'm not familiar with it. That is one area of Canadian politics I am not up on my Ontario provincial riding names.
It is fantastic. Streetsville is famous for Hazel McCallion.
So, yes. Okay.
Yeah,
everyone knows Hazel.
everyone knows Hazel, right? So, and Bonnie Crombie was the member of parliament here before she ended up running for city council, and she's now our mayor in Mississauga. And it's a great riding. It's a beautiful part of our city. It has a wonderful small town feel in it too, which I'm originally from Port Elgin, and I love going downtown Streetsville because it feels like Port Elgin, but the riding itself has great parts of it. It's lovely. There's beautiful places to walk. There's trails. It's cool. It's a really cool residential area, and I'm really proud to have this opportunity. So yeah.
Well, I really wish you all the best in your campaign, and
thank you.
I am cheering you on from Calgary, Alberta. And just I want you to know that your story has touched me very deeply.
Thank you, Sarah.
I don't want you to get lost in all of this either. So if there's anything that I could ever do to help raise awareness, and I hope that you are elected and you can be given a bigger platform to talk about these issues.
Thank you.
And to keep this from happening to any other families.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's it. We'll do everything that we can, right? And that's why I'm running, right? I have seen firsthand the consequences of what happens when we don't prioritize public health. Here I am now. I've lost one of my children to a flu outbreak. But I grew up near Walkerton. I was in high school when the water crisis happened. I know what happens when we don't pick people over savings, and we can do better, and we have to. I mean, people are more important, and this is it. And here we go. So I've got 2 more kids in the public school system. I want to see them continue to have the safest, happiest, healthiest opportunities that they can in the years ahead. I don't want to see any more of their program options cut. I know here in Mississauga, they might not have the opportunity to take physics or calculus when they get to high school because of the cuts the current government has made. And I don't know how that lines up with their goal to make us a global STEM leader if you can't take maths or sciences that you need. There's a lot of work to do. We have to fix it.
Well, so here in Alberta, students might be learning how to code with a pencil and paper, according to the Minister of Education. So
okay. Well, great.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done, right?
Mm-hmm. And maybe we should start by investing properly in our priorities. And I haven't talked to anyone, and I talk to people on the phone every single day. I haven't talked to a single person who doesn't think that we need to make sure that we're properly investing in the things we value most. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what we're doing right now because we're not doing that. So it's time to get back to our values. And for me, that's making sure that we're taking care of every single person who lives in this province. And that certainly includes our children. There's
an MLA in Regina named Elena Young. She's an NDP MLA, and she has a hat. I'm not sure if she makes them. I think she might make them actually, but her hat says "People over profit."
There you go.
And I think that some people will listen to me and say, okay, well, I'm on the, they'll be like, the money has to come from somewhere. Yes, it does. But our children, if you use the line that children are our most valuable resource, then we need to treat them like that.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly it, right? We are going to lose so much by not investing properly in public education right now. What happens in 20 years if we've just had a generation of kids who weren't able to actually study what they need to learn in high school? What is that? How do we underfund public education and think that that's going to work out for us in the long run? I thought we wanted to be competitive.
Well, these are all conversations, and I hope potentially that you get to be at decision-making tables in the future and you can contribute your very valid and worthwhile points of view on these things, because we do need to realign, I think, our priorities coming out of COVID. And I think that education has to be one of those things that we refocus on and really think about in a more thoughtful way. Not to say that it hasn't been thought about thoughtfully before, but in a post-COVID world, what can we do differently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it has been so disrupted for the last year and a half. And it should look different in September. We shouldn't just go back in with whatever is cheapest for the government and easiest for the boards. We need to build something that works properly for the kids. And nobody's saying that that's going to be easy. It does have to be done properly because the kids need that. And they have come last every step of the way through this pandemic. That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
It's time to give them what they need.
I agree. And I think that is a fitting place to leave it for today. I really want to thank you for talking to me. It's such a pleasure to see your face and to hear your voice. And one day when we can travel again, I'd love for our children to play together, and then we can have more conversations and celebrate some special things together.
That sounds great, Sarah. Yeah, I'd really love that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jill. All the best. And we'll talk soon.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. This was Elected. Thanks for listening today, and a very special thank you to Jill for sharing her story with us today. Until next time.